was the weekend of Bitcoin 24 in Nashville, if you haven't heard. And there's been lots of happenings in the Bitcoin space at that event. Obviously, there was Michael Saylor who spoke yesterday, or yesterday, 2 days ago. And RFK spoke and said a bunch of nice stuff for the Bitcoin space. His closing comments to the conference in his speech was like, he has an orange heart, right? Like basically very pro Bitcoin, and made another interesting proposal saying that if he were elected, that he would, make it so that first of all the government would buy, 4 million Bitcoin, which is another whole discussion, but we'll get into that maybe just for a bit, and also that he would make Bitcoin transactions unreportable and not taxable. So that obviously drew large cheers from the crowd. And obviously his closing statement that he has a Bitcoin orange heart, and he believes that Bitcoin is the color, Bitcoin orange is the color of freedom, and all this kind of good stuff, drew large applause at the end of his speech. But the notion that the U.S. government would buy 4 million Bitcoin or acquire 4 million Bitcoin, of which it already has, hundreds of thousands, if not a million or more, in known wallets, but at least hundreds of thousands that we know of in known wallets. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of. And why am I not a big fan of it? Well, Bitcoin is ostensibly supposed to be the people's money. Now, we know that it isn't anymore because large organizations, banks, whales, etc., have purchased significant quantities of it in the tune of many millions. And at this point, to call it the people's money is almost kind of an ironic joke, because what started out as something that was notionally a form of, a people's money, or the people's money, has, come into the possession of people who are clearly not, or organizations that are clearly not just regular people. So I find it, frankly, quite disheartening for somebody who's been in Bitcoin from the beginning, that people would basically cheer on the notion that governments would acquire so much Bitcoin when it should be held in the hands of regular people, because that is the entire purpose of it. If Bitcoin is financial freedom, then it's the people that should hold it, right? If the same powers that be hold all the Bitcoin, or the massive overwhelming majority of it, then that isn't in the people's hands. And you can argue, well, the price of Bitcoin goes up because these big whales buy. Yeah, maybe. But would you rather have, 1,000 Bitcoin at $100 or $1,000 a piece, or even $20, 20,000 a piece, which is, by the way, the price that it went up to before there was institutional derivative trading, selling margins? Or would you rather have, less than a Bitcoin at 70 grand or 100 grand or a million, right? And I understand you can divide them to 100 million Satoshis and even more, but that's not the damn point, right? The point is it has been taken out of the hands of regular people, and is being held by people who have significant quantities, massive bags. And that, in my opinion, is a real big shame. It defeats the purpose of having a quote-unquote decentralized currency, cryptocurrency, when it's not decentralized so much anymore, in the sense that the actual people that hold it are a rather limited set of organizations, right? There are not a million governments. There are many billions of people. There are 8 billion people. But there's not a million governments. There's not a million governments and central banks and large corporations, of the size of, many billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars a year or more, that can actually be such big whale holders. And that's the liquidity providing type company or organization that people, frankly, like Michael Saylor are advocating for. Not just political candidates who, frankly, have no statistical chance of becoming the next president. of the United States. You know, and yeah, Robert Kennedy's statement about Bitcoin is all wonderful, rah rah, let's go, but realistically, he's not going to be president, right? Um, I mean, if that happens, okay, then who knows? But if that does happen, then acquiring 4 million Bitcoin is not in the interest of the people that hold it, like regular people. Not at all, right? And it's a shame, in my opinion. You can disagree with me all you want, whatever. Leave a comment, tell me how dumb you think I am. I don't care. The purpose of this invention is that regular people would have access to a cryptographically signed cryptocurrency that was actually created to be decentralized and not held by huge whales and not intended to be controlled by enormous whales, right? The whole purpose of it is to let people have quote unquote financial freedom. How are you giving them financial freedom if in fact they're just really being owned by people with enormous bags? It's a ridiculous notion. So that is why I don't support that notion. And if it was up to me, then it would be in the hands of regular people and not significantly sized whales. At the same time, like I said, Michael Saylor was giving his presentation and he was suggesting that people should expect to see 1, 2, or 3, maybe 4, probably just 2 or 3 such countries that would buy 4 million Bitcoin apiece. Well, if 2 or 3 countries own 4 million apiece, that means that they're going to own between 8 and 12 million out of the 21 million supply. So we're talking more than a third to more than a half. And that is absolutely not acceptable when you want to create something that, again, is supposed to be in the hands of actual people and not in the hands of huge governments, right? It's not useful, and it certainly is no longer tenable to call Bitcoin the people's coin when most of it, within the first 20 years of its existence, might be held by just a couple of big governments. If the United States and Saudi Arabia, or the United States and China, or China and Saudi Arabia decide to buy 4 million Bitcoin apiece, what's the point? But you can, people will have Satoshis. Yeah, man, that's not the point. You're missing the point. Okay, they're going to create central government control over decentralized cryptocurrency. And every time that Bitcoin passes through their exchanges or through their hands, when they tax it or anything else because of their local jurisdictional powers, they're going to tag it and they're going to make it basically, an undesirable mark on that particular Bitcoin or on those fragments of those Bitcoins. And they're going to make it even more trackable, which, again, there's no reason for that, right? They don't need to, it's already a public ledger database. You can already see every transaction from what wallet to what wallet, right? If they want more transparency than that, then why don't they invent more transparency on cash? Oh, because they can't. So they're going to exploit the technology to abuse people's privacy. And that isn't a good thing, right? That's, frankly, a very bad thing. That defeats the purpose of cryptocurrencies. That defeats the purpose of Satoshi's gift, so to speak. So when you see Michael Saylor advocating for this, and he's already got billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and his company does too, how is that helping the average retail trader get more? It's not. And he tells people, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. But what he doesn't say is, and yeah, by the way, the people who are actually buying it right now are big, huge corporations who actually have money to spend and aren't afraid of taking the risk because they don't care if they lose $100,000 or $1 million or $10 million or $100 million. Whereas the average person does. The average person doesn't have that kind of money, right? It is not, in many senses, it is already not what it was intended to be. It is already, in many ways, past the price point where frankly it was ever dreamt of going, because the entire idea of it was that it would give you the ability to have financial freedom, and that meant not being controlled by governments. That's literally the point. And now it's gotten to the point where so many large institutionals have bought in on this thing that they've run up the price already twice, because they did it in 21. Do you think that was retail investment taking it up from 6K, 9K up to 60K the first time? It wasn't, right? We know that. Do you think it was the second time in 2021? Do you think it was retail investors doing that? It was not. Yes, retail investors, retail traders were in on it. Those of us who were in the tiny community of, a few million, whatever it is, 50 million traders. That's not a lot of people on planet Earth. And who drove it up this year in 2024? It was institutionals buying up huge quantities of it while they were rolling out the Bitcoin ETF. That's who drove up the price in early 2024. It wasn't retail traders who did that massive amount of buying, right? Retail traders were selling and selling, and miners were selling and selling to those big institutionals who were acquiring millions of Bitcoin in the last year, right? And they've acquired more than 1 million just in the first half of 2024. That's not an accident, right? The buy pressure that started on January 1st, 2023, the significant buy pressure that started then, and basically we're still in that phase now of lots of buy pressure. Of course, you have days when you have down sell pressure, but the overall buy pressure that started January 1st, 2023 was institutional. And in January 2024, when they launched the Bitcoin ETF, it just increased. In 2023, they knew it was coming, so they started buying, drove up the price. 2024, they knew it was there because it was being launched in early January 2024. They knew. What, do you think that when you hear about it on the news that the insiders don't already know? You think the people, the lawyers working with the SEC don't already know, that they're not already planning for these things? What, do you think they're dumb? They're not, right? So Bitcoin, I'm sorry to say, okay, in many ways has been defeated by the very organizations it was meant to slay, in the sense of giving people financial freedom back. Now, you can still say it gives you financial freedom. Yes, it does, kind of. And yes, Bitcoin has won. And yes, crypto has won. And we know that because all the rules and regulations that they're trying to apply now, and all the taxes they're trying to levy now, what are they really? Those are just capitulations to crypto, because they know it's the future. So that's the old system saying, okay, we realize you've earned your place among our ranks. In fact, you're our new leader, really. But we need to save face and, show that we got something in exchange for allowing you to do what you're doing without putting up even more of a fight. So crypto won, yes. 1 year ago, by the way. I've been saying this in 2019, it already won. I was telling people in 2016 and 2017, the whole first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I told them the winning is right around the corner. We're already in the then they fight you stage. This was back in 2016 and 2015. By 2017, they were fighting like crazy. And by 2018, that was their last throes of the fight. By 2019, they'd already given up. They'd already lost. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And look back on my videos and I tell you specifically when it happened. So yes, crypto won, but also crypto lost. What did it lose? It lost its sense of purpose. Right? One of the big failings of Bitcoin is that it has no way of blocking something like governments or huge financial institutions or whoever from getting control of it. It doesn't have a whale blocker. Should it be allowed to? Maybe, maybe not. That's a whole different debate. I think that there is an argument for having coins that don't allow whales to have significant quantities, more than there should be a coin where the person who has the absolute most amount cannot hold more than X amount, or X times the person with the absolute lowest amount. I think there's a good argument for that. And you want to say that's socialism, you want to say that's anti-capitalist, whatever. We don't live in a world with your capitalism. don't believe me? Look at the markets. Look at the capital markets. You can tell me they're unregulated? You can tell me they're truly unfettered? Obviously, they're not. What is the SEC? What is the CFTC? What is the FTC? Are these things? What's the House? What is the House Finance Committee? Senate Finance Committee? What do these organizations exist to do? They exist to regulate the capital markets. Do they not? Yes, they do. So to claim that we somehow live in a capitalist world is a joke. It's a lie. And you should stop pretending that. You can say, ideally, we'd like to live in a capitalist world. That's fine. Ideally, I'd like to live in a world with no wars. But we don't live in a world with no wars, do we? So it is a ridiculous claim to say that, A, we live in a capitalist society, and therefore, B, we shouldn't put any kind of limitations on capital vehicles that we create. Why not? If we can create financial devices, look at Hex. And you can trash Hex all you want. You can say Richard Hart, you say he's a scammer, he's not, in my opinion, a scammer. He didn't create a scam, he created a wonderful thing. For many people, it was wonderful. I know a lot of people lost money on it. Maybe most people lost money on it, but that's because people have a poor sense of understanding of the market, right? But he said very transparently from the beginning exactly what it would be, and it did exactly that. And for those of us who managed to unstake at good times. And it was also very tradable. And it also prevented whales and people with huge bags from claiming any. Now, it didn't limit people from acquiring significant amounts, which is a separate story. But like I said, I think there's an argument for making a capital vehicle that does restrict people from attaining a certain, more than a certain amount of a coin. Why? Because again, if you don't, you're going to have centralized control eventually. And it could very well be that one of the ways hi, hello there. I am not Ben Gvir, not at all. But yeah, shalom, person. There's no reason we can't create a capital device that does put limits on the amount, right? And that if you get to a certain level, then for every additional amount that you want, you actually have to contribute some portion of your bag to people who have less, right? And the people at the bottom get the most, and then the people above them get slightly less, and the people above them get slightly less, and so on and so forth. So basically, real distribution. And you might say, again, so it's socialism. I don't care. You can always invent another device. You don't like it, invent your own device. I don't see any reason not to create now a series of crypto tokens, even an entire blockchain that is centered around capital redistribution. You want real financial freedom? It will not allow governments and huge banks and giant whales to own the majority of the coins. Absolutely not. It will prevent them from doing that. How? Well, you can do a form of KYC in order to know for sure who the parties are, right? And if they're a company, you can find out that they're a company because they have to register as a company. And if they open up multiple accounts and you find out that they have multiple accounts illegitimately without declaring it ahead of time and making it all whatever, then the blockchain would have the right to repossess their coins. I don't see any reason not to create something like that. To preserve and maintain capital distribution at a fair scale. That doesn't mean that I'm anti-capitalist. It doesn't mean that I'm anti-people making money. No, I'm not. But I am anti a handful of people or organizations controlling the vast majority of the coin. So that's my take on that. So yeah, I know. Michael Saylor gave a rousing speech and a great presentation, and a lot of people liked what they saw, and they were, clapping and happy that he spoke. And he said some nice things, and he closed the speech with a nice quote from Satoshi, which said, it might be worth getting some just in case it catches on. And then he said, it looks, it has caught on. Well, that's nice. But if it's only caught on with people who have significant bags and can obtain enormous quantities of it, then it creates a massive problem. You can deny it all you want. It's just mathematically a fact. If you're going to reduce the available capital available from 100% owned by retail people, regular people, down to what will effectively be less than 5% or even less, because the other 95 are going to be owned by people who have significant quantities, right? Thousands of coins or more, or even hundreds of coins or more. That is, simply put, not the intended purpose of that invention. And again, I like that invention a lot. I've been in it from the beginning. I am a proponent of it in many ways and have been since the beginning. But does that mean that I think it should continue the way that it's going? No. I definitely don't think so. Right? It should absolutely be redistributed, but not through Bitcoin, because Bitcoin effectively is already in the hands of people who won't give it up. They're never going to sell. The tiny portion that exists to buy or sell is diminishing quickly. It will be gone fairly soon. And yes, there'll always be some people willing to sell their coins, but it's not going to be usually big holders. It's going to be retail people who have some amount, or miners who have some amount, who are going to be willing to part with their coins for some premium. Right? Retail trading on Bitcoin will effectively be gone in a matter of a few years in significant portions. Now, yeah, I know we'll still be trading Satoshis, we'll still be doing that forever. But the fact is, the type of Bitcoin trading that we've been seeing for the past 15 years is effectively over. It's ending very soon. It's going the way of the dodo. It'll be gone in a few years, at most 5-10 years. And believe me, those million Bitcoin that are currently available on the market will not be available in another couple of years, if not sooner. I mean, look, more than 1 million Bitcoin have been purchased since January of this year. Do you think that there's going to be any left by the end of this year? The only ones that are going to be left by the end of this year are the ones that people put on the market new, for up for sale for the first time, or for the first time in a very long time, because they're going to be delighted to sell it when it breaks 6 digits or whatever. But it's not going to be that many, because at that point, most of the people holding them, anybody holding more than one, very likely has more than one. They might have 2, 3, 4, 5, 1,000, whatever. In other words, people who don't have a very strong interest in selling it at all, and they're going to wait for it to hit 7 digits. So the trading is going to be between big holders only, in terms of whole Bitcoins. And that means the retail traders are out. So if anything, people really should just start talking in Satoshis, as I've been saying for many, many years. And they should be trading on exchanges that feature Satoshi and not Bitcoin, because nobody's going to own a whole Bitcoin in those markets. Right? They're going to be buying fractions of it. And I know you don't need to, but it's a branding thing. So instead of letting people acquire 0.00001 Bitcoin, let them acquire, 10,000 Satoshis, 1 million Satoshis, whatever. First of all, unit-wise, they'll feel a lot better about it. And in terms of being able to limit access to those kind of exchanges to retail traders is also a lot easier. But more importantly, I think it's an opportunity to create a new financial vehicle, a new crypto really, that will simply limit the acquisition of those coins to people who are actually retail investors, right? Because it is ridiculous that we're allowing this asset to be basically a whale asset. That was never the intended purpose of it, and it defeats the purpose of it. As a person who's been into cryptography for decades, as a person who's been into digital currencies for decades, and as a person who's been into Bitcoin from the beginning and into all kinds of other cryptocurrencies from the very beginning, I can tell you this was never the intended purpose and has lost its way. Almost 100%. It has absolutely degenerated from where it was intended to go. And it's a shame. It's a shame that greed got the better of the market. But it was to be expected because of the nature of the protocol. It's a wonderful protocol. It's a beautiful protocol. It's, energy. It's an energy play and all this other wonderful stuff you can say about it. But it has its drawbacks. One of its key failures, one of its key vulnerabilities is exactly that. Right? It has no ability to control access to the super wealthy. And that is a shame. And not just super wealthy, governments, central banks, Federal Reserve, large financial institutions, huge corporations, or corporations with significant copious quantities of cash available, capital at their disposal to buy it out. And that defeats the purpose. And I don't care if those people throw the best conferences and have the best events and all this other garbage. That's all PR flim-flam. Okay, now was it a nice looking event? Yeah, so far it's been a decent looking event. Does that justify, does an event a year full of some of the biggest whales justify letting the biggest whales have the majority control of the coin? No, it doesn't. I'd rather be part of an ecosystem that's more humble, more modest, and more in the hands of actual people who are regular, average, everyday people who can actually benefit from holding such a device and who can use it to trade back and forth and to buy and sell and to save because it will increase over time, etc. Increase in value over time, if it does. I'd much rather create something like that. But just to have another device that's just going to put the same exact bags into different wallets of the same exact people who already have the biggest bags, it doesn't make any sense. Are there a few people who made nice big fortunes from buying and holding significant quantities of Bitcoin? Sure, obviously. Regular people that became millionaires and billionaires, absolutely. But are they even 1% of the people that own Bitcoin? No, they're not. Clearly not. And is that the purpose of Bitcoin? No, it's not. Right? What is the purpose of it? To be an electronic peer-to-peer cash system and network. And that is gone in the sense of being a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. They're not your peers. Technically speaking, you might call their servers peers and their wallets peers, but they're not peers. You're not on the same level. If you don't have billions of dollars worth of stuff, of resources, they're not peers. Right? They're on another level. And good for them, wonderful. Yay. But they're not your peers. Don't get it twisted. Yeah, no, geranium. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. And I'll be pushing out something this year, maybe this month or the next month. Most likely anonymously because, why not? But expect a new device that will actually take into consideration the interests of real people and will limit any ability of large organizations or governments and institutionals and huge whales to control more and more and more than they should. And that if anybody is found to be doing that, that the system can reclaim any unauthorized obtained amounts and can redistribute it from the ground up proportionally other tools and features built in to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of wealth. Because honestly, that's the point of cryptocurrency. It's to enable actual financial freedom, which does not mean just transfer the big pots from the existing system into a new digital system. That's just as trackable as before. In fact, more so. It's a public ledger. Right? If nobody can obtain a Bitcoin, then it's not financial freedom. If all you can acquire is Satoshis, technologically speaking, sure, it's the same thing. But realistically speaking, it's not. You're telling people use Bitcoin, but all they're really using is Satoshis. I understand. They're just fragments of the same thing. No, believe me, I get that. I've been telling people that forever. But you are limiting the ability of people to use this thing without the hindrance of central powers. And that is counter to the purpose of the invention. That is the problem. People are being limited in the control they have over their own Bitcoin or Satoshis. And that is the problem. And huge whales like Michael Saylor and governments like the United States or Singapore or Japan or Russia or China or India or Saudi Arabia, they're not helping. They're making it worse, and they're doing it on purpose because obviously they don't want people to actually have financial freedom. They don't want people to have financial freedom. If they did, they would have left it alone and they would have not interfered. And they would have let the market do what it's supposed to do. But that's not how governments operate. Governments exist to hinder free capital markets. They may create them, but they sure as heck regulate them to death in order to get centralized power. Because all government officials work for governments, and the purpose of government is to grow. That is the purpose of government. I don't care if you hate government, if you work for government, if you take a paycheck from government, even if you do everything you can to counter its existence, right? To do everything against its rules. If you take a paycheck from them, if you work for the government, or if you support the government, you're supporting an organization that exists for the sole purpose of growing and taking more control away from people. You cannot name me one government that exists for the purpose of giving more freedom to people. Because it doesn't exist. Not one. And yes, some are better than others. But that doesn't mean that even the best ones are actually giving more freedom to people as time goes by. Every single last one is abusing digital technology to take freedom away from people. Every single last one. I don't care which one you point to. There's not a government on earth. There's not even a quasi-government on earth that isn't trying to wrest more control and privacy and freedom and rights from people using digital technology. There isn't one. It doesn't exist. And if you think there is, please tell me what you think it is in the comments. I 100% guarantee you are wrong, because there isn't. And believe me, I've looked at every single government and considered what they're doing with digital technology, and there is not one that is actually trying to free people more by using digital technology. Every single one is trying to take more power away from the average person, period. So consider that, think about that, and think about what that means as a person in the cryptocurrency space. What is the point of all this wonderful technology if we can't actually use it for its intended purpose? Why even bother having it? Why even bother using it? Oh, because people in countries where they don't have bank accounts will have more financial freedom. No, they won't have more financial freedom. They'll just have access to a financial system that will take more freedom away from them. So yes, they may have access to more capital, and that's great, but they won't actually have more financial freedom. They won't actually have more values freedom. They won't actually have more rights protected. All of those things will be infringed upon by their governments. Every single one of those key principles is already being infringed upon by those governments. If you don't see that, I don't know what to tell you. Learn a thing. Tell me how wrong I am. And that's it. Talk to you later. Happy cryptoing. What's up, Zoe?